Hello, and thank you so much for joining a discussion today at the Sustainable Food Summit. As you've just heard, my name is Alyson Greenhalgh-Ball, and I'm delighted to kind of share with you today my thoughts about how we start to think about translating theory into what I call them. I've spent many, many years in public health, working in academia as well. And I really would like to share my thoughts on how we get very practical and pragmatic as we start to think about our very lofty global goals and how we put them into action. So without further ado, I'd like to take you through my slides. But first of all, and I'd like to do a bit of grounding, a little bit of context setting. And I would argue this is nothing that you don't already know. And that's why you're here today, to talk as a collective and make action, positive action. Food is everything. We must have that principle at the heart of all our conversations. Food isn't just nutrients. Food isn't just environmental impact. Food is way, way, way more than that. Food touches every aspect of our lives. But we have taken it for granted for too long, and our food systems are vulnerable, but it's not too late to fix it. We can and should and must work together to build stronger food systems. We can create a world where no one is hungry, no one is poor, no one is left behind, a world where people and planet can thrive, flourish, and prosper. Okay. So today, I'd like to move and pivot over to thinking about how we translate some of our very global progressive narrative around how we will nourish and feed our growing population within our precious planetary resources. We have very clearly the what and the whys. These are set out by the Sustainable Development Goals. We see them here, very, very clear, very aggressive goals, and the actions that we need to take to get us to 2030. But now we really, really need to think about the how. And I'm delighted the UN Food Systems Summit, and indeed COP that's coming very shortly, those dialogues and key convening opportunities are really starting to put on the table game-changing ideas, solution clusters, and coalitions for action. It's absolutely marvellous that we're seeing actors from around, right through to citizen level, coming together, convening and driving collective action. So what does that action look like? Well, I would like to take you through what I'm calling that's going to drive very practical solutions. And the first one that we need to think about when we start to think about global goals, because context is everything. We have to think from not only global to local, but actually local to individual. We have to put on the table culture, economics, values, the norms, requirements, family, environment, and only then, meaningful and sustainable change. If you look at these delightful women, the pictures that convey a story from around, each of them have different requirements from a nutritional point of view. They live in a different environment. Their economic situation might be very different. We have to translate and be intelligent. The second pollinator is eating more plants and more often. Plant-rich cornerstone for healthy diets and reducing food environmental impact. Yet, intakes globally remain low. Fruit and vegetable consumption is among the top 5 risk factors for poor health, with over 2 million deaths attributable to low intakes. We do need to see a dramatic shift in the ratio of plant to animal-derived products. That everyone becomes vegan overnight? Absolutely not. Remember, context is everything. In some parts of the world, we know that there is a largely vegetarian diet, yet in others, too dominant. How do we get that rightful balance? But net, collectively, we need to eat more plants more often. The second pollinator that I'd like to talk about, so diversity is absolutely key. And if you think about whether diversity is a plant, this all underpins our ability to nourish people and planet, a cornerstone to address food security, malnutrition, and indeed biodiversity. Yet, we are far from diverse in our choices, ingredients, and repertoires. Our diet isn't diverse. We only eat about 150. And just 4 crops account for over 60% of global calories. This illustrates our reliance on 4 crops, monocrop culture. They are dominating. And of course, that drives unintended consequences, both dietary, because we're not having the rich, diverse nutrients and phytonutrients that we need, from a soil perspective as well, and from an environmental and land use. We need to be diverse with our choice. Pollinator is thinking about lower impact choices. Those choices can, of course, include protein. We know that there is a very live, very healthy debate about getting the rightful balance of protein choices. We talked earlier about the animal-derived products taking too much dominance in our diets. We have to find the right balance here of livestock, because it absolutely does have a role, blue and aquatic foods, and of course, plant-based foods. Remember, we need to eat more of those. And we also need to balance the nutritional benefits of all of those with other aspects such as livelihoods and the social impact. Lower impact choices can also we can think about swapping crops. Higher to lower impact crops, those could be those that are less reliant on water or indeed nitrogen fixers. And those climate resilient crops that we have all over the world, and often they're very, very highly nutritious as well. How can we make sure that we're some of my favorites include millet, teff, and fonio. Beautiful, delicious, highly nutritious, important to livelihoods, and also climate resilient. Is waste. And indeed, how we turn that into upcycling opportunities. Sadly, 28% are eaten. And around 1/3 of food produced is never consumed because it's either lost or wasted. Often the most nutritious: fruits, vegetables, legumes, nuts, and indeed. How do we think about using our foods, perishable, thinking about how we kind of make sure that we're buying sufficient to meet our needs? We're thinking about storage. We're thinking about those clever recipes ideas that utilize the whole fruit and veg, the whole animal. Think across the supply chain, where we're looking at turning waste into nutritious ingredients to make new foods that are out there in the marketplace. And I've given you some examples here from Australia. We have I Am Grounded, a really beautiful new startup into highly nutritious energy bars. And also we have Regrained, which is looking to use highly nutritious and returning those into snacks, bars, beautiful puffs, and of course, pasta. You see the pasta here that they've just opportunity as a USP, as a marketing opportunity to consumers, drive using repurposed foods and being really conscious about our waste. Might sound very, very obvious, but really, how do we drive consciousness about thinking about how important nature positive solutions are? We need to now make those the norm. Of course, once again, this is context specific. So what will work in one country regenerative agriculture is. And that is becoming more and more desirable and actually more and more mainstream as we understand the positive attributes that we can get from using regeneratively produced ingredients. I draw your attention here to the graph on the chart. This is from a recent publication from Design. This shows the positive kind of benefits of using regeneratively produced ingredients. Diversity loss, a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, an increase in total food output, the norm. And of course, this extends beyond agriculture to blue foods, sustainable fisheries, and aquaculture. The next pollinator is thinking about frequency. Absolutely pivotal when we think about our personal and collective actions and how we make an impact. We know from People, Planet, thinking about or consume something and the amount in which you do it, or indeed positively. So let's kind of have a think about this. You can see down on the screen here, beautiful tomatoes, rich in lycopene. We know that that's inflation. However, if you only eat those tomatoes once a year, it's unlikely to have that positive impact. Macaroons, how delicious they look. We know those would be beautiful to celebrate, to share, enjoy. But if you eat those every single day in large amounts, if you have them every now and then, completely perfect to enjoy as part of a healthy, balanced, sustainable diet. You can own something and in what amount you do it. So putting all this together, there are tools that really can help and guide decision makers, whether that's decision makers at a government level, a personal level, indeed a food manufacturer. These are guiding some key principles looking at planet and people and how we continue to nourish. These are two of my favorites. So the first one, I mentioned it previously. This is the circular design for food, and it's looking to food to really make the right choices. So first of all, we have the ingredient selection. We talked about that, choosing lower impact ingredients or crops, thinking about the upcycled opportunities and how something where we can. And of course, packaging, whether it's elimination, reusing, and material circulation, and putting all that together when we're thinking about nourishing for people and planet. The other model, which is again one of my favorites, is the Barilla double pyramid. It's been around. I've used this for well over a decade. And recently we've seen it updated, where we have regional kind of versions of this. So you can go on to the Barilla website. What's the impact? It looks at personal health alongside the impact from a climate perspective. And talked about. So you can see at the top of the pyramid, those foods, even though they still remain an important part of the diet. Right to the bottom, you can see the rich abundance. You see the flip of that when you look at my climate and how the foods very closely correspond that are not going to nourish people, but also be good for planet as well, has become easier. I'm delighted that we're now moving towards a problem. We need to continue, of course, putting on the table solutions that are going to nudge and nudge, making a difference and really ensuring that we continue to nourish the planet within our precious planetary resources. I'm going to finish where I started. I want to remind us that food isn't nutrients, food isn't a commodity, and good food ultimately is about love and celebration, place in our hearts and on our plates. I'd like to draw your attention to the Good Food for All. There's wonderful resources to continue to make the changes we so desperately need. And that's all I wanted to share with you today. And I am absolutely delighted to be part of your very productive conversation. And I'd like you to take a moment to think about our collective impact, our conscious impact, and how you continue to make that, whether it's with your spoon, your plate, your mix, basket, your policy. You might be policymakers, packaging, people, suppliers, and how you communicate and celebrate. Thank you very much.